Hey, good evening, ladies. And thank you for being here. Tonight's presentation or workshop is on an introduction to Ayurveda and really on the rituals that we can use to thrive. And so tonight I'll be talking a little bit about Ayurveda, my experience with Ayurveda, how I've healed myself, and then some of the deeper concepts of Ayurveda and how you can benefit from it and how you can integrate it into your life. And so before I get started, I just want to share my screen and do a brief little introduction. So let me share my screen here. Wonderful. I just want to say before I get started is that if you have any questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat, and then I'll also be opening up for question and answers afterwards. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Yvette Desai. I'm an integrative yoga and habits coach. I'm also a yoga instructor and author of an international best-selling book on Amazon, which is called Relaunch Your Life Force, which is really focused on how you can take a holistic approach to reducing stress and also for weight reduction. I don't really focus on the concepts of Aeroveda in this book, as this was one of the healing tools that I used very early in my career. And it's in the past 3 years that I really began to focus on Ayurveda. And I will touch a little bit more on my story as we move onward. But I do want to share with you that I really work with women who are feeling very overwhelmed and stressed in their life, who are looking for healing from emotional eating, for looking and healing in their life and how to move on, whether they're feeling stuck or overwhelmed in some way. And so using the tools of Ayurveda and habit changing science, I help you move to your desired state of healing, whatever that might be. It's different for every person. And before we get started as well, I want to share with you, each of you have an opportunity to sign up with me for a 30-minute session. I have 3 spots available next week, and this is really an opportunity for you to personalize your plan and see what's available in terms of the solutions for you to move forward to heal your body. This is a personalized session, a value of $150, and you can schedule here if you'd like. You can also email me. We can set up a time. So I want to start this presentation because I'm sure that each of you are here because there is something in your life that may not be working. Maybe the things that you are using, whether or not it's changing the food, changing your exercise, changing your supplements, or whatever other remedy it is that you're trying to use to heal or move yourself forward isn't necessarily working. And so one of the questions that I want to ask you is right now, how do you want to feel in your body in the next month, in the next 3 or 4 months, in the next 6 months, maybe the next year? And just take a small time to reflect about how you're currently feeling and how you want to feel, how this might be different. And so sometimes this can help, we can leave ourselves feeling a little stuck in this situation, right? Maybe we're not really sure of what we want. Maybe we're going through a midlife crisis and we're not really sure what the next step is. But just think about it in other perspectives from the sense that maybe if you had an abundance of energy and vitality, what would you be doing with your time? And what would you be doing that you're not able to do now? Or maybe that you're putting on hold because maybe you have a very time consuming job. Maybe you're caring for an elderly parent. Maybe you're caring for your children. Maybe there's so much going on that you're not able to do these things and you want the space and time to do that. And what would that be? What would bring you joy and what would bring you the energy so that you could wake up, bounce out of bed and feel really good and sleep well at night without the worry and the concern? And how would your relationships be different? Would you be more present with other people? How would you want to feel in those relationships? And then other questions to really think about and reflect on are, what is a challenge that you face when your energy is low? Do you feel stuck, like you can't move forward? And what do you do when you feel this way to get yourself up and going? And just take a moment and reflect on that. You can write it down. I always feel that it's worthwhile writing these things down because it makes us more conscious and aware of how we're currently feeling and how we really want to feel. And sometimes I refer back to when I was a kid, right? The energy that we had, the abundance of energy and curiosity that we had. We'd bounce out of bed, we'd feel very energetic, we'd be very curious about the world and the people around us. And, we'd be constantly moving from the time we got up in the morning until we went to bed at night. So we had different dreams and passions and joy. And as we age, sometimes this tends to fall by the wayside, or we get uncertain or lose our confidence about what we really want. When I think about this, I think about wanting to have constant curiosity about different things in life, to continue to learn, to be able to move in the way that I want to move, and have the space and time to do the things that I want to do, and feel really grounded in my body, and just really to be able to do the things that I want to do, be present and have loving, nurturing relationships and spend time with the people that I want in my life, to continue to be able to travel, hopefully a little bit more after this crisis that we're currently experiencing, hopefully dissipates a little bit more, but being able to continue to travel in the way that I have, to move, to be able to do yoga and to hike and to go on my paddleboard and kayak and just do the things that I love to do and continue to do this well into my third year or my third, no, my third stage of life. And I'll talk to you a little bit about those stages of life. And so the thing is, eventually, sometimes what happens is that when we're in our 20s, when we're in our 30s, we think that we're going to live forever, right? And unless we've suffered from some kind of chronic disease or a close family member or friend has suffered, we continue to do the things that we've always done in the way that we've done them, eat the way that we have, exercise in the way that we have, because we feel good enough. And so the question is, still around this question is, do you know how really good you can really feel in your body? And, it's when we have these challenges with health or illness, is when we usually make these changes, right? When we feel maybe we have our own confrontation with illness. I know for my sister, for example, she had some fertility issues and realized that she needed to make some changes in her life. And then when I was in my 40s, I experienced some issues around osteoarthritis, around thyroid and adrenal fatigue. And so I was forced to make some changes and make that choice between pharmaceuticals and surgery or complementary modalities. And I chose the latter. And so, it's some of us won't make these changes until we're forced to. So when we're looking at Ayurveda, and as I continue to talk through this conversation, I want you to consider if you're being reactive or proactive in your situation. And so, and also being open to what kind of transformation that you can ultimately make in your life. And I'm sure that many of you may or may not have experienced some kind of transformation in your life. It might have been around a learning experience, it could be around a weight loss, it could be around a health issue. Maybe if you have studied yoga in any way, I know that this is an area where I really experienced a lot of transformation and didn't even realize that I would have that transformation when I came to the mat, especially because I came to the mat thinking of the physical benefits more than anything else and didn't realize it was going to be something different. So this workshop is really for you if you're ready to learn more and be open with an open heart and an open mind, and learn a little bit more about how Ayurveda can help to support your health and wellness goals and growth in life and age better. And if you're really just fed up with just feeling good enough in your body, that you want more, and maybe you have had this transformation and you've gotten so far, and now you realize that you've come to one point in your life and that you can have more. And maybe you're just fed up with not having the energy that you want to be able to do the things that you want at the end of the day, or even on the weekend. And maybe you're the type of person who comes home and just plops on the sofa. And in earlier years, you weren't like that, and you want that back. And if you're sick of really looking for band-aid approaches, looking for the right food or looking for the right supplement to, fix that that symptom that you're actually feeling. And if you're feeling anxious or stressed, maybe by current things that are going on, maybe personally or just globally, there's a lot going on. It can feel very overwhelming. And so you want to reduce these feelings. And maybe you want more control over your health and you're looking for tools that you can incorporate on a daily basis so that you can feel better in your body and experience this sense of healing and growth. And also that you're ready to put yourself first. So often we as women put ourselves last. And, so if these are the things that you're encouraged by, you're open to, then this is a presentation for you. And as we go through this presentation, I want you to keep in mind too, what will happen if you don't take action, right? Think about if you don't make these changes. We're all here for a reason. We're looking for other answers on how to grow and how to move forward. Will you continue to feel tired? Will you continue to feel stuck? Will you continue to be an emotional eater, for example? Or maybe you're just putting it off for when your kids, grow up and leave the house. And why can't you enjoy some of this now? And so maybe your health or your energy will decline. And by not really taking action today, what is happening is that you're beginning to rob time from time today from tomorrow. So going to bed late, right? Waking up in the middle of the night, maybe relying on sugar or relying on caffeine for temporary energy fixes. And then instead of being proactive in your life, you're being reactive. So there's a sense of fear of maybe what if you're not having structure. Structure is so key to evolution and moving to the next step. And I like to use this little example of my children. And when, everyone came home during COVID. And what happened is that, all of a sudden the sink was full with dishes 3 times a day. No one was doing, anything. Everyone was like huddled in the room trying to deal with what was going on. And it was just a crazy time. And so we decided we had to huddle together. And if we were going to be in this little bubble for, we didn't know how long, we needed to rechange or restructure how we were living together. And so we created a new structure and, we decided that everyone who had a meal had to put everything away right after they ate. So we didn't have this craziness in the kitchen and feel overwhelmed in the evening when we really just wanted to sit down and just do nothing or, just be together. And so this is so important, is having this structure to help yourself move forward. And so I'll be talking a little bit about what this structure is. And alternatively, what else could happen if you don't this? Are you going to continue to take the painkillers? Are you going to continue to take the pharmaceuticals? And so we know that, these things are only temporary fixes, that we need to get to the root cause. And so going forth through this. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about my story. I'll turn this off just for a moment so that you can see who I am, really. It's nicer to see my face than a screen, I know. And so I really never dreamed about being a health coach or a yoga instructor. I was in the business world for many years. And I did decide at one point in my life, right, as we began to have children, that I didn't want to be in that corporate world anymore. And I began to transition out of that in different ways. But it wasn't really until my mid-40s where I experienced sickness. When I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, this thyroid condition, and osteoarthritis. And it was to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. And at that time in my life, I was taking care of my family. I was cooking healthy for them, or what I thought was healthy at that time. But for me, I wasn't really taking care of myself. I was working a part-time job. I would be volunteering. I was running my kids around in many different directions. My husband traveled a lot. So a lot was left up to me. And, I really ran myself ragged. I would get up at 5 a.m. for, my boot camps. I'd use my energy from caffeine and sugar. And so I was always on this roller coaster ride, and it really worked to my detriment. But what I realized is that it didn't just start with the caffeine and the sugar. It took precedent earlier in my life where I wasn't really taught to take care of myself. I suffered from a lot of emotional eating. I had an eating disorder. I suffered from a lot of anxiety. I suffered from a lot of depression. But I was taught to just kind of shove it under, suck it up and shove it under the table, and then move on with life. And so these things begin to build up in your life, and you don't begin to heal in the way that you need to. And I was never really taught to take care of myself, but rather to take care of everyone around me. And so I began to crash, and I did. And so I became a health coach because was lucky at that time to have people around me who knew about complementary modalities. And I did heal myself through changing the way that I ate, beginning to take care of myself through acupuncture, through physical therapy, through chiropractic medicine. So a lot of things that I used, a lot of herbal remedies to help heal myself. And I really did heal myself to a certain extent. And I decided if I could do this, then everybody should be doing this as well. And so that's why I became a health coach, to help women like myself who felt overwhelmed and scattered, a little anxious, who was using caffeine, sugar, being an emotional eater, to really help heal themselves. But then my life took another transition where I became very involved with yoga. And that's when I became exposed to the whole science of Ayurveda, the sister science Aeroveda. And that's where I experienced another set of growth there. And also I experienced that, I can have these habits, but I really needed more than just having these habits. I needed to understand the science behind how to change a habit and how to identify patterns in my life prior to where I was, and how I was repeating these patterns and what was triggering these patterns so that I could change these patterns. And so now here I am, and this is why I develop programs like 10 Habits to Thrive, my annual program, to help you women thrive as well. So I'm going to share back my screen, and we can go back a little bit now and get into the meat of the presentation about Ayurveda. And I'll talk a little bit about that now. Ayurveda is all about living in rhythm. It is the sister science of yoga. It's been around for actually over 5,000 years. It's one of the oldest healing systems in the world. And really, the idea behind it is that everything in the universe is connected, whether or not it's dead or alive. Our mind and body spirit, when they're in harmony and we're living in rhythm with the cycles of the day, cycles of the night, cycles, the rhythms of the seasons, and also the rhythms of our life, we have good health. We are in balance. And if there's something that disrupts this balance, maybe we're living against those rhythms, we're pushing through our illness and just seeing it as a nuisance, or not sleeping the way that we need to and not eating in the way that we need to, then we become out of balance. And we can get sick, and our body gives us signals around this. And we may listen and we may not. And if we're not listening, then it usually happens that we become chronically ill. And so the idea behind this is that the key to living in harmony and living in balance and to thriving is to practice these daily habits, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But the idea is that by practicing these habits, we are able to build what we call ojas. And this is kind of our ideal immunity, the glue that keeps us together. It's also known as the sap of essential life energy. And there's these energies within Ayurveda and the elements. So we've got these three energies of Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. And then we have the elements, which are part of them. So those are two fundamental concepts, which I'll talk to a little bit in a moment. And the idea behind it is that we have good digestion. If we're metabolizing our food in the best way possible without a lot of stress, and we're not experiencing digestive distress, then we are able to absorb and digest our nutrients in a very good way, which leaves us having a very strong digestive fire. And if we have a calm and settled mind, then we have a very strong immunity, and we will thrive and we will age better. And so this is the whole idea behind it. And so the other part of Ayurveda as well is that we, instead of looking at the symptoms, so for example, you might have a rash on your skin, or maybe you're feeling like you have acid reflux. Ayurveda will look at what is the root cause of that. And in allopathic medicine and Western medicine, more likely we look at, what are the symptoms, and then we treat it. And so in my experience, there's a lot around stress management, stress reduction, that is really linked to our overall health. But many of us are too busy to think about what this is and reducing our stress, because coming in, in Western society and the US and a lot of the world, we're in this go, 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 do, do, do mentality. And yes, there is stress, and yes, but it's a lot of it is around perspective. and less, and like powering through an illness or an ache or a pain, we consider it a nuisance. But it is our body talking to us. So Ayurveda requires us to be an active participant in our healing process by being aware of what we're feeling, being aware of what our senses are telling us. So taking care of our senses, our sights, our smell, our taste, our touch, our hearing is very important in Ayurveda. And that will really be the foundation of our health and well-being. It's the study of our lives. It helps us to connect that mind and body connection. So I want to talk a little bit here about this clock that I have in front of you. And so you'll see that it is the Ayurvedic clock and it is correlated with time. So you'll see at the top of the screen here, it's noon and midnight, and then you'll see at 2 a.m., 2 p.m., and then you'll see sunrise and sunset, and then 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. And so we divide it into these three energies, Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. And I'll start, I guess, with the Vata time. And so if we're looking at I'm going to explain this in terms of the energies during the day, first of all, because these energies also exist within the seasons. So for some of you who were involved with my workshop earlier this week, what we did is we talked about the fall and we're in the Vata time, but these same energies also exist within our time of life. So Kapha time is the time of life for a child up until they're a teenager. And then we come through that Pitta time of life, which is like your late 20s to your early 50s. And then as you come into your 50s and older, then we're what we call in Vata time. So specifically, I'm talking a little bit about the day here. And so we start with Vata time, and we're looking at say 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening. And I'm going to correlate some of the habits here. So earlier in the conversation today, I talked a little bit about these habits of yogis, these rituals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them here. I may talk a little bit more about them later in the conversation if we have a little bit of time. So Vata, you'll see the elements that exist here. So the elements are very much part of Ayurveda, and I'll talk to them momentarily about them. But the ones here are air and ether. And so when you put these together, that is wind. And you'll see that the arrows here are dispersing in all different directions. And so Vata, we're very much in our mind. There are what we call gunas, what we can also call qualities that describe the Vata state. So they are dry, light, mobile, and subtle. So if you see if energy is dispersing and we're in fall time, the energy is dispersing. So at this time of day, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening, this is a very good time to be creative, to have a lot of thinking time, to have strategy meetings, because you're all over the place and you can bounce in different ideas. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention here too is if you'll notice that sometimes around 3 or 4 in the evening or the afternoon, you might have cravings. You might feel a little bit tired. You might reach for sugar. You might reach for caffeine. And so this is indicative of not necessarily having a very good lunch and you're craving something, because your energy from lunch should really sustain you through the afternoon. And that leaves you time around between 5 and 7 to have my first habit, which is called early light dinner. And so Ayurveda is very keen about having an early light dinner because our digestive fire is at its height. And our ability to digest our food and metabolize and absorb our nutrients is at its highest during 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So early light dinner is key. So if any of you are suffering from going to bed and not being able to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night, one of the things you might want to consider is the timing and what you're eating for dinner. And so early light dinner is around having like sauteed vegetables, some fats, and maybe a very light protein, or even soups. Depending upon the time of year, it could also be like a smaller serving of soup or a stew or something like that. And then we're moving into the kapha time of night. So I'll go around during the day as well, night, but we're 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And this is the time, we'll see here, kapha is made up of water and earth. Those are the elements. And so that can bring us, that equals mucus. So that is kind of heavy. It can be cloudy. It can be, there could be a fluidity to it. It could also have a denseness to it. But kapha energy is very stable. It's a very loving energy. And it's also a very communicative energy. So you'll notice through the evening, our energy goes down. You can see the arrow is going down here. So this is a time that our body is actually telling us we want to do activities where we should be winding down, connecting with our family, connecting with friends, right? So doing maybe light housework, maybe a project that you're working on, maybe games, things that bring you together and that are not a lot of heavy lifting or invigorating in any way, because then that'll inhibit your time to go to sleep. And ideally, we want to go to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock. And we want to be in bed by 10 o'clock because that really enables our body to fall asleep before the 10 p.m. mark and the 2 p.m. mark. And why this is important is because, the kapha energy is low. During this time, our body is not able to digest food in the same way as it could in the middle of the day. And so another reason you don't want to have a heavy dinner. Otherwise, our body won't be able to do what it needs to do between 10 p.m. and 2 p.m., which is detoxify our body to regenerate our cells. So I have a lot of people that tell me that they're night birds and that, they're a night person, they're a night owl, and that's when they get all their work done. But really, you're not benefiting yourself in any way. You're actually aging yourself more because you're not allowing your body to do the detoxification that it needs to do to have you really rest and relax through the night. And so if we're able to fall asleep between 9:30 and 10, that also, there's called this liminal field here, where we want to wind down here, we want to release the stress here, we want to resolve, relieve ourselves of having too much technology, because all of those things stimulate our mind. And there's this half hour before we go to bed where we can use this time to kind of reset our nervous system, maybe do a light meditation, maybe some light self massage, which is another, this meditation and the self massage are another habits that we try and fit into our day. And it doesn't have to be a full 30-minute massage or a full 30-minute meditation. These are just ways to really impress upon our nervous system that we can wind ourselves down and relax so that we can sleep more deeply and effectively. So going into the middle of the night and the Pitta time, this is where there's fire and water and bile. And so this is the time of night where we can really detoxify our body. You'll see that the elements here, or rather the gunas here, are the hot, sharp, spread, oily, intense. And this is our digestive mode. So we're really detoxifying in the middle of the night. If you find yourself staying up between 10 p.m. and 2 p.m., you're going to have that second wind, right? And everybody has that second wind. And that's because the energy is moving up. But then, from staying up, for those of you, because I know I used to do it for years, is that it's harder to fall asleep during that time, right? So you're tossing and turning, you're thinking of your to-do list and the things that you need to get through. And so by going to bed a little bit earlier, we are able to really get into that rest period. And then what happens between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is that we come into this Vata time. So that's the time where our body has a lighter sleep. We might be dreaming during this time. There's also a liminal period here, as right before the sun sets, when the sun is rising, where we can impress upon how we want our nervous system to reset again. We can do a visualization. We can do a gratitude exercise right as we're getting up. And capitalize on this so that we can impress how we want to feel during the day. And so that's important to kind of take this energy, this creative energy that we have, and we feel lighter when we wake up during this time. And you'll notice that then we move into 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, and still the energy is moving down. And so what we want to do when we wake up, first thing is we want to drink some warm water. We want to eliminate our feces from the day before, and so that we can, detoxify our body and then bring in new nutrients. It's a great time to do a body breath practice for about 10 to 20 minutes. And we want to do that because we want to raise the energy up. I'm sure you've noticed if you sleep in on the weekend, or sometimes even sleep in during the week, that your energy might be lower during the day, just because you haven't been able to lift it. So in Ayurveda, one of the things that's really key is our ability to keep ourselves in balance. And so if we're not in balance and we're feeling a certain way, we want to feel a different way, then we want to do the opposite. So we see this arrow moving down, our energy is kind of low in the morning, and to raise that energy, we want to do, for example, a body breath practice to do that. It's also a great time to have breakfast because we want to energize our body, bring more, we want to bring in more nutrients for our body so that we can sustain ourselves. So here I just want to talk a little bit about some of the fundamental concepts of Ayurveda, that being around the elements. I talked a little bit about the energy model. I'm going to go slightly into the constitutions, but I'm going to do that just a little bit later. I want to talk here to the two palms here. So there are 5 elements. And so the idea behind Ayurveda is that we're comprised of the elements and we're comprised of these energies. And they exist within us, they exist within the seasons, and they exist within the time of life. And so when we look at this, it's also correlated to the organs in our body and our hands. So we look at the first element, which is fire, and then we look at our thumb. And so fire, as you can imagine, is associated with our eyes. It's the heat, Pitta is that, so Pitta, if we think of Pitta, that's made up of fire and water. And so we've said that Pitta is the energy of transformation, right? And so that's when it helps to fuel our digestion. And so this is we have the power when we have more fire in us, we have the power to transform what we want, who we want to become. Our bodies better digest how we are. We're very discerning in how we think. We have very good mind, a very good perception. And the qualities of this are hot and dry and light and subtle. So these are what fire is. And so that's why it's part of the Pitta energy. When we go to the next one is our index finger, our pointer finger, and that's air. And so that is associated with touch and skin and feel. And this is the idea of motion. All that moves in nature is propelled by air. The wind is a representation here. So this affects our body nerve impulses, our breath, the way that we speak, the movement of digestion. So the movement and how all the food moves in and through our body as we digest it and eliminate it. And it also affects the movement of the limbs. So this can also affect our thoughts, as I said before. So air is one of the elements of Vata again. And so the qualities here are light, subtle, flowing, sharp. Then we move to our middle finger. And so this is ether, and this is space, also known. I didn't give you the names of the other ones. I'm not going to confuse you too much because the Ayurvedic terms can get a little confusing here. But this is associated with hearing and sound. And so you can if you put your hands over your ears, you'll notice you can't hear as well. And so this is the element of space, right? It represents the space in our body, around us, all that is not matter. And in this mind, and is in our consciousness. And so the qualities here are cold and dry, subtle, flowing, sharp, and clear. And so just understanding these qualities, you don't have to learn these, you don't have to memorize them, just helps us to understand how we're feeling in our body and what we need to do in an opposite way. And then we move to our ring finger, which is known as earth. So that's the earth element. And this is associated with our smell, with our nose. There's a lot of stability in this. And you can, think about this when we think about kapha, because kapha is earth and water, right? And the body, it represents the body, it represents stability, the physical structure, growth, cohesion. And there's a lot of mental stability here. So the one thing about kapha is that they're very stable people, very reliable. But if they're out of balance, then they're a little bit too moist, a little too fluid, a little too heavy. And then we can move to our pinky finger, and that is water, and that is our mouth, taste. And so we know that it's easier for us to taste things when we're more hydrated, when we have more, we need saliva to be able to taste our food. And this is representative of flow, of liquidity. It has no motion on its own. Its flow is in the path of least resistance. Water in our body is representative of fluidity. And so there's a lot of love here, a lot of compassion in our mind when it's associated with our mind. And so it's really important that when we talk about these elements, we think about the senses because they're correlated to the senses as well. And the senses are key to Ayurveda because they are the window to how we are in touch with ourselves, and how we care for these senses is very important. And as many of you might know from having elderly parents, or you might have experienced it yourself, that our senses as we age begin to decline. Many times our eyes begin to decline, our hearing, sometimes our ability to speak, our smell can all fade over time. So we want to protect our senses. And in Ayurveda, we use oils to protect them. Um, so so I'm going to talk a little bit too. So I have this other chart here that I was showing you just to understand how the doshas are comprised of the elements and how the qualities of them are described here. And it's just used just really as a tool. It's nothing you need to memorize, but over time, it takes time to understand some of this. And I want to talk just a little bit here about the constitutions that we have, because this is important, because part of these energies, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, is that these reside within us. And this is merely another tool for you to better understand yourself and who you are, and how you can see how you get out of balance, and how Ayurveda gives you the tools to bring you back into balance. And so each of us is born with what we call a prakriti. We call this generally our constitution. And so this is based on family genetics, heritage, the quality of your parents' reproductive organs, and your prakriti will never change over time. So if you were born a Vata, you will always be a Vata. But each of us usually have 2 or 3 of these within ourselves. So for example, I am primarily Pitta, I have Vata, and just a tiny bit of Kapha. And I tend to get out of balance with my Vata a lot. But then we have, I talk here a little bit about coming out of balance, and that's what's known as the Vikruti. Okay, and this is what we want to pay attention to. And so if any of you are interested in learning a little bit more about this, I will be including a link in the follow-up email, which is at Banyan Botanicals, and you can take your own dosha quiz. And that'll give you an indication of where your imbalances are. And then Ayurveda will give you the tools and provide you with the tools to help you bring you back into balance. And it's not a Band-Aid solution. It's not going to happen immediately. We do have to put the work into it. Remember, I said in the beginning that in Aeroveda, we are responsible for doing the work to bring ourselves back into balance. And so that being in balance is called a Vikruti. And so that's the concept of change and balance in our mind and our body. And this changes over time. So you could have an imbalance in Vata and then heal that. And then you could end up having one in Kapha. And it might just sometimes change with the seasons. Sometimes it changes with our time in life. Sometimes it changes if you have any lifestyle changes. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep or not taking care of yourself, or if you find yourself pushing through situations. And so I want to just go through just a little bit about this. I don't want to go too much time into this, but what I do want to say a little bit around this is that our Vikruti is very smart. So if you are a Pitta, for example, and Pittas tend to have, well, as I said, it's the energy of transformation, are very driven. So they tend to sometimes ignore the signals that their life is telling them. So an example could be that maybe they're eating a lot of food that's very spicy, and you can imagine that spices are very hot, right? And so that could irritate a Pitta who already has a lot of hot in themselves. So they could have a tendency for, maybe they get some indigestion and then they ignore it, but they kept eating this hot food and not taking care of themselves. So they end up with acid reflux, or even worse, an ulcer. So these are the stages that what will happen is that things will get worse if we're not honoring and actually listening to our body. So what I love about Ayurveda is that our body is always giving us these signals. And if we listen and if we're proactive, we can remain in balance and prevent getting too sick later on in life. And so I just kind of wanted to just share that here. So, you can take a look at this chart. Vata is the energy of movement. Kapha is the energy of structure and lubrication. You can take a screenshot of this. I've used it in other presentations, so I know some of you might have seen this in the past, and I go into it. But what's key to understand here is that when you are in balance, when you are balanced, not imbalanced, when you are balanced, in Vata, you're very energetic, you're adaptable, you've got a really good communication with people, and you've got a positive spirit, and you feel creative. And with a Pitta, you will feel very intelligent and perceptive and warm and friendly and courageous. You may be a good leader, and you feel enlightened. Kaphas tend to be very loving and nurturing. They're patient and stable people, loyal, and they're also very forgiving. And so there's different body types as well. I'm not going to go into that so much, but I want you to think about like the imbalanced mind here and the imbalanced bodies. So if any of you are experiencing any of these, you might want to just look at what your Verkruti is at the time. And so for example, an imbalanced mind in Vata, you might be feeling very anxious or hyperactive or indecisive. And so for that imbalanced mind, some of the things that you can do are to do more grounding exercises, for example. So maybe slower movements, walking, maybe doing more yoga or stretches, for example. Maybe sitting in silence and doing more breathing exercises just to help bring yourself back into balance. That's just an example that I wanted to give you. And then if any of you were at my workshop on Sunday, we talked a little bit about that imbalanced body. And so with the Vata, for example, we're in Vata season right now, right? So we have the tendency to feel dry, maybe to feel dehydrated, maybe to feel constipated. You might have more tendency to have more PMS. You might have drier hair or skin, your nails can be brittle, and also feel arthritic and have a lot of pain. So there's things that you can do, like staying better hydrated, having more oils in your diet, making sure that you're eating more cooked foods, for example. So these are just some examples, and obviously it differs for each one, and I don't have the time to go through each and every one of them right now. But so that's just an example there. And so I want to go into a little bit more about these habits. And I think that they're important to understand. I did touch upon them just initially a little bit about early light dinner, and the idea about that, going to bed, and just really setting up a routine to begin to wind down in the evening so that you're listening to your body signals, honoring that the energy is actually moving down, that we're doing quieter activity, more connective activity. Starting the day right, I kind of alluded to, but I didn't actually name it. But that is going to, wake up in the morning, drink your warm water, eliminate your toxins and poop in the first thing in the morning, and then do a 20-minute body breath practice before bed, just to bring that energy and that lift of energy up into your body and that new prana so you feel amazing. Eating a plant-based diet, not saying you have to be a vegetarian or a vegan, but really having more plants in your diet and even incorporating things that are seasonal and local into your diet. That's always more important than even necessarily eating for your body type or your imbalance. I alluded to self-massage and sitting in silence, and then befriending healthier guidelines. So important is that we're eating and not eating every hour or every few hours, but having 3 meals a day so that our body has this time to digest its food fully. Right? So many of us have digestive issues, IBS, or leaky gut issues that lead to arthritis or other chronic conditions, IBS, because we're constantly eating on the go or constantly eating and not really taking the time to fully nourish ourselves in the moment so our body can digest and really detoxify and eliminate in the way that it needs to. And then coming to your senses, I talked a little bit about how important it is for us to take care of our senses as we age and how we can use oils to support that practice. And then one of the biggest things that I feel is so key is this whole idea of easeful living. And that's really the perception of being able to manage the stress in our life. As I said earlier in the conversation today is, stress is so key because If we're not managing our stress, it is really at the root of so much of disease. And it's so important for us to be able to manage that. And what happens in Ayurveda is that if we're incorporating these self-care practices on a day-to-day basis, we build trust in our body, we build stability in our body, and we have more space. Our body feels that we are, it knows what to expect. It knows that in the morning, we're going to wake up and have a certain practice, that we're going to feel good about this. And, I'm all for the B minus. I have to, say that, sometimes we can't get all of these in every single day, and that's okay, right? We go for a B minus, maybe we're doing it, 4 to 5 days out of a week. So, these are things to just to think about. And I want to really allude to a couple things here. I want to go back to this, what are you willing to commit to in your life? It's about taking radical responsibility. And this is really part of Ayurveda too, is taking responsibility for your life. Do you want to be that person that continues to blame other people for what's wrong in the world, to be a victim? Or do you want to take full responsibility of your circumstances in your life? Because it's not only about you, it's also about your family and the example that you're setting for your family and others around you. And so it's an important question to ask yourself. And then the other thing is too, is that it's easy to have these habits, right? It's easy to say, I'm going to bed early, but are you actually doing it? And are you incorporating it into your life? And so, we have grown up with different patterns in our life, different ways of living. And this is, some of this can be very anti-Western, right? But then we also have different beliefs as we grow up, because we've been taught to believe that this is the way it should be, that I should take medicine, I should take a supplement, I should eat a certain food, that the next diet is the best way to do it. But the question is, how do we incorporate this into our life? How do we make these changes so that we can be consistent in moving forward, so that we can have these habits and actually incorporate them into our life? And so there's a number of different ways that I go about working with people who join my 10 Habits to Thrive group. We follow a concept of Kaizen. And this is a Japanese manufacturing philosophy where we make these small little improvements. So for example, early light dinner. Okay, this is always one of the hardest one. It was actually my hardest habit to incorporate, having a busy family with people were, moving in 10 different directions. How do we do that? Maybe it's just pushing dinner back. Maybe it's just having a smaller portion of dinner initially, and then slowly changing it. Maybe we're adding more vegetables or making a soup instead. So there's different ways that we can go about it depending on what's going on in your life. We look at habit triggers. So there's different habit triggers in our life. We've got a prior action. We've got other people in our life that can trigger us. We have emotional, and these can all be good and bad, right? Emotions that trigger us. Maybe we want to eat something, or we want to, because we're avoiding or we're feeling anxious, for example. Maybe at a specific time at like 3 or 4, we know we always have our coffee, for example. Maybe we substitute that with something else. Maybe there's a specific place. Maybe every time we go, with our grandmother, and we used to go to this certain bakery that we buy up all these things. Maybe we go to that bakery, but maybe we buy something different, for example, or we go to the fruit store next door, for example. But just looking at what those triggers are, whether or not they're good or bad triggers, and seeing what is the action that we're used to taking and how we can change and create a new action, for example. Habit stacking. Habit stacking is, we have good habits. All of us have some good habits, right? And so we want to build on those, right? So if we have a good habit of closing up the kitchen right after dinner, then maybe instead of going for the ice cream, later on that evening, maybe we have a cup of tea, for example. So just doing that instead. And so building on those kind of habits, architecting choices in our environment. So how does our environment look, and how are we shopping? How are we prepping for our foods? Are we, building, food plans and thinking ahead? And are we looking at the times that we're highly motivated to make all these plans, so that when we're really low motivated or we're really tired and we don't want to do all of this stuff, that a decision is already made for us. So we already put our sneakers out, for example, first thing in the morning, so that we know that we're ready to move forward. And this last one, that the power of the posse is really, I think, so important. This is the power of a group. I know I've been a health coach for many years now, and I've worked with groups. I've worked with people one-on-one, and where I see the most transformation in people is when they are part of a group. They see that other people are able to do it. They have other people lifting them up. They have the power of the support. They have the empathy. They have the compassion of people. And they have an ability to bounce ideas off. They have accountability, and they have a mentor who leads them. And it's having these people around you. Each of us are a sum of the 5 people that we spend the most time with, and a sum of the 5 people that those people spend the most time with. So there's 25 people around us. So I would beg you to ask yourself, who are you spending time with? And are those people, do they have the habits that you want? So I'll come back to this because I was talking a little bit about structure before, but your body and mind is a result of your current habits. And you hold the power to design your body and your mind by changing, and your life by changing your habits. And so we began with this question of what was your dream, of how you wanted to feel in your body in a month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And the question I have for you is, how are you going to reach that dream? And so maybe what you've done so far hasn't necessarily worked. And how are you going to achieve that feeling? And are you really ready to step up to that task and take that radical responsibility so that you can thrive and just not be in that survival mode, that victim mode? So my next round of 10 Habits to Thrive begins next week, September 22nd. And there's only a couple spots left, and I'd love to invite you to partake. And if you are truly interested, then I suggest that you book a discovery session with me just to see if it's for you. And we will apply some of this to you and see if it's right for you, just so that you can make your own breakthrough. So we start next Wednesday if you're interested. And so what I'd like to do now is open it up for any questions that you might have. Either you can unmute yourself or you can post your question in the chat box. No questions?
I have a quick question, Yvette.
Sure.
I think,
yeah.
How do you incorporate the lighter dinner? That seems, I mean, it just seems like a difficult thing to do, and an earlier dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is, I'm not going to say that it's easy, because it was one of the hardest habits for me to incorporate. And so, like, like I said, we use this philosophy of Kaizen. So I know that a lot of times when we begin a program, we expect to go to that A plus. Like, I have to do it right, and I have to do it right every single day, right? But that's when we really set ourselves up for failure in many ways. And so what's important for us to do is take these baby steps and see what is possible. So for example, if your normal dinner time is at 7 p.m. every single night, then maybe you want to start moving it back at 6:45. Maybe you do that for a week, and maybe you move it back to 6:30. Maybe you're just having a smaller portion of dinner, right? So there's this one book that I refer to called the One Bowl book, and it just talks about like having one bowl that you eat out of, and you touch that bowl, you feel that bowl, and so you're very in tune with what you're eating. But what's going to happen over time is that you're going to see the effects on your body and how you feel. You'll begin to digest your food better and earlier because there's less to digest there, and you're going to begin to sleep better. And what happens is, the question is, how do you want to feel? That's really, and why is this so important to you? Right. And, if you truly want transformation, then, we just can't, we can't keep putting the Band-Aid on, right? And, it just takes baby steps. And that's why the course is a year, right? Because, we can't expect to achieve all of these results, when we've spent a lifetime in another way of living. Right. And it is possible. I mean, I've been doing this for over 3 years now, and I took baby steps. You know, and, you know, I know that I sleep so much better, you know, and my whole family doesn't do it 100%. And, you know, what we do sometimes is, you know, I might eat, if I'm around a little bit earlier, I might eat a little bit earlier and then they eat later and I'll sit with them and maybe have a cup of tea. And, you know, in the beginning, it was a little weird, right? Because we're used to sharing that, but you know, they didn't care. They just wanted me to be there, right? So what's Jamie saying? That's beautiful. Fantastic. So, you know, see, Jamie's able to do it. She's sharing with us here is that she's done eating at 5:30. She brushes her teeth and she flosses and it just helps as a routine. And I know that's, you know, if you can close your kitchen by then and, you know, it isn't necessarily all Ayurveda. I mean, and a lot of times, you know, when we start with these habits, we're not really focusing on Ayurveda so much, right? You know, it's just about these habits and these habits just happen to be the habits of yogis, right? And that's what works for them. It's enlightened them. These rituals have allowed them to open their heart and the mind in a different way. Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. How
Sure.
to maintain, because after your spring cleansing, I definitely inhabited lots of healthy habits. Let's say I still don't drink coffee. I have early dinner. I sleep much better through the night. I have much more energy. The weight was down, but to maintain is when I fail most of the times, and I feel I'm start falling out of certain habits, even though I did it for like almost 5 months, 6 months, and it just not being home all the time, being on the road, and as much as I'm trying to prepare, and I usually like I still trying to be vegan or like plant-based most of the time, but still being on the road or especially in the summertime, it's difficult. So I'm falling into again a little bit of snacks here, a little bit of chips here, a little bit, and it's piling up, and I see falling back into the old habits, how to maintain, how to keep it
Yeah,
going.
right. So, I mean, some of the things is, you know, understanding, you know, like what I was talking about in terms of like the
Yeah.
changing science there is, you know, a little bit about like recognizing what are the triggers, right? So, you know, I travel, we still do this, you know, but we're also going for an 80%, right? We're not going for that A plus. And so when we travel, you know, we try and have, you know, a bigger meal in the middle of the day, maybe something later. So if we're going out, you know, maybe we'll just, you know, have an appetizer or something like that. Um, and, you know, finding out what are the triggers? What are the triggers that are, you know, causing you to eat the potato chips or have the snack? And question yourself, are you truly hungry, right? Is this what your body really needs at this time? You know, or what is it, what else do you need? And so, you know, I find being part of a group, you know, having like-minded people around us that are doing the same thing really helps support those choices. So when we know like that, you know, our accountability partner or the people in the group are sharing these great recipes and the things that they're doing and the solutions they're doing, we're more supported, right? We have this group behind us that are doing the same things and we don't feel so alone.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel much better than I used to, but and I wish to go back to this, I would say 2-3 months ago when I felt absolutely great. Right now, it's just a good, like you say in B plus. Before it was A.
Well, that's okay. You can still get back there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
You can
no,
still get back.
definitely. I mean, I feel, and around holidays, it's probably the most difficult time because there are
Yeah.
so
And
many
well, holidays are
choices,
always difficult
options.
because there are, you know, there are times in our life where there's a lot of traditions, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we don't have those traditions. I mean, my girls still bake cookies.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a cookie, right? You know, we're not depriving ourselves. It's just that the decisions that we make are more conscious, right? And we know that in the decision that we make at that time that it's going to have an effect on our body. And we are making, it's like my choice. Am I going to have, no wine, or am I going to have 3 glasses of wine? And I know that if I'm going to have 3 glasses of wine, it's going to have a very different effect on me than if I don't have any wine at all. It's the same kind of thing there. And it doesn't mean that you can't have that. Maybe you're just having smaller portions of some of those things. And slowly over time, you begin to change some of those things or add other options in for yourself. Right? But the
Yeah.
important thing is that you know that you have these habits. And the more you do them, the more they become habitual for you, right? And you're more likely to incorporate them as you move forward because you know how you're feeling. It's always
Sound-
tapping back into the feeling.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here this evening. I will be sending a replay out for those of you who missed it. Thank you, Jamie. That's okay. I understand. Thank you for coming, and appreciate all of you being here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I have 3 sessions between now, the end of the week, and the beginning of next week, if you're interested in the 10 Habits to Thrive program, so we can hop on a call. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye.